Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Yeah, we were having a couple of technical issues. Does anyone surprised by that? You shouldn't be. So, um, give me a chance of actually. I was just talking with Bruce, and we're getting this worked out as I talk. So, give me 1 second. And John, is that you? Hello, John. I think he should be on there. Uh, John, are you there? Folks, this is live. You got to love it. I think that this will work. I know. Let's see. The other one is over there. So just give us time here, folks. We're just working through the technicalities. Let's see. It looks like he should be able to be talking. So we'll hope that, and Bruce will be here. I was just talking with Bruce. He's down in Costa Rica. So hopefully we'll get all of this up and running and, get on with what will be a fascinating conversation with two people, one that has directly in the middle of it, and the other, Bruce, that actually helped in writing the book with John in describing the story. And folks, it is a story of a story. So just give us a minute here. And I know that, let's see. John, are you there? Let's see. And John, are you there? I know that. Now I hear myself. Okay, well, folks, we'll just continue to ride with this. Thank you for putting up with the issues. We'll get them worked out here. Just bear with us. So that's what I say. That's how we adapt and flow, isn't it? So give me a second as I get out of here and collapse this. And I still show that we have two participants. So welcome, everybody. I know it's like anticlimactic. It's like I was looking, all to this. And so as he goes here again. Up. Let's see. John, did I hang up on you? This is fun, folks. This shows you how professional you have to be on your toes when you're dealing with technology. So we'll just continue to ride here. And I really think that what I'm going to do here, John? No. I love this, folks. Okay, let's see. Hello, Bruce. How are you? Bruce, are you there?
I am, Wayne.
Good.
Is there any way? I see that you're live now. Hello to your
Yes.
your wonderful audience. Is there? I hate to do this. 7 minutes into the start time. Is there any way we can do this on Skype? John is just lost. He's computers are to him like haying is to you and I. It's just not a thing. So I did try and do a test an hour earlier. He assured me he had Zoom installed. He doesn't, and now when
it's an issue there, isn't it? Yeah. Well, thank you. I think the issue that I have on my end is that I haven't, there's an interface that I have not set up with Skype on YouTube. So going live streaming would be the challenge there.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any way that John says that he's calling the dial-in number?
Yes, and I can see it. I've opened it up.
Is he getting through?
Oddly enough, I did not hear him. I could see that he was there, but it did not. I could not hear him on the audio side. Wait a minute. Let me see. I see that he is. All right. Let's see if we can get him.
Hello.
John, are you there?
I am here. I was muted.
Hey, fantastic.
It muted me automatically.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bruce. This, persistence always pays off, doesn't it?
99% of the time. John, is there any way you can bump up your volume a little bit, or can you?
Let me see.
Oh, there you are.
You're good now. You're good now. You're good now.
Okay, good. Wonderful.
Yeah, as they would say, you are definitely hot on the mic. That is great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. John, I was just telling Bruce before we went live that I actually finished your book in a little over 3 days. It was a read that I think once you start reading, it's very difficult to put down. What a story. What a story.
Well, it's been quite an adventure, I guess. That would be the polite way to say it.
To say the least. I think what I'm more impressed with is that how you've been able to maintain your sanity for the events that you and your wife went through. I mean, it would drive most people stark raving crazy.
Well, we have a good background. I mean, I have 30 years as a psychiatric social worker, and my wife worked for the FBI. So, we kind of came pre-prepared, I guess. I don't know if that had anything to do with being chosen to do this, but it just kind of worked out that way.
I think there's some philosophies that say that we choose our path before we come into this life. Wow. That is, you hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I kind of wish it was the lottery, but I'll take it.
Well, it's a good jackpot. That's what I got to say. And Bruce, thank you. You're down in Costa Rica, correct?
Southern part of Costa Rica, just a little bit north of the Panama border.
Okay.
In a region called the Talamanca Mountains, which is a UNESCO heritage site, United Nations Environmental, Scientific, Cultural Organization. It's maybe the most biodiverse 1,000 square kilometers in the world. Had a juvenile black panther at the end of my driveway, December 26th. Yeah.
Well, hello.
Yeah,
kitty.
No, yeah. Talk about an ominous animal sighting, Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you're up in the mountains, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. As I was reading, and part of you were in the intro. You take walks with boots, I guess, because of what the snakes that can easily put you in a grave.
Yeah, you've got about, snakes are so prolific here. Costa Rica's major contribution to global medicine is Costa Rica actually developed a universal antivenom just because they have so much experience with poisonous insects and snakes.
Wow.
Yeah. But you have about, depending on what bites you, terciopelo, you have about 2.5 hours to get the antivenom into you. And then even then you're going to be in the hospital for about 6 weeks.
Yeah. And John, you got what? Scorpions, tarantulas, critters out there that don't.
Yeah, we have sidewinders, which are quite aggressive. We have a lot of rattlesnakes. Yeah, we got all sorts of critters out here, but nothing like what Bruce faces.
Wow.
At least we can see them coming.
Good. I took a little bit of defensive shooting, so as they would say, you have a good kill zone, right?
Exactly. And I'm a good shot.
Speaking of what a great entree into exactly, I think, some of the experiences that you've encountered where you are at. One other question I wanted to have for you is that, one, you've taken about 19 of these rogue grays out. What fascinated me was that you had basically tried what? Shooting them, stabbing them. Apparently, the one that in y'all's bedroom that you took the baseball bat to, these little boogers are hard to get rid of.
Well, they are. I should add that before we got to the point where I started dealing with a samurai sword, I actually grabbed them by the ankles and picked them up and slammed them against the wall. We live in a brick house, and they do break.
They do break. So I have to tell y'all, I had a little bit of time before the show here, and I was thinking about the book, and it does impact you that these beings can actually, as you said, they can actually look in, like popping their head in, as you said, from a shower. John, I guess what I'm asking, is that a technology, or is that a principle of a law that they're using that they can actually transcend dimensions?
I'm not really sure. I can tell you this, and that is they use it extensively. It's not a something they do at random. Any place on the property where I've seen them enter, what they will do is they will literally stick their head through first. They look around. I imagine at this point, after all the confrontations and firefights that we've had, they're kind of looking around to see if I'm in the vicinity and if I'm armed. But the rest of the time, they just kind of just pop in. They literally just, you turn your head and you see them for a split second out of the corner of your eye, and then you realize they're there.
So as I read your book, and the story is, and I know that you've talked about it quite in other interviews, but I still find it interesting. The first time you saw one of them, I mean, it would say, I guess, from a psychology point of view, wouldn't that cause some cognitive dissonance for the person experiencing that? I think it would be for myself. I have never met one.
Yeah, I would say, quite frankly, I've had a pretty interesting life long before I ever arrived at the ranch. And working in mental health, I've worked in prisons. I've worked in crisis situations where people were up on roofs that had to be talked down. I've faced people at gunpoint. I've had a pretty radical life. And so, to me, these little assholes, or excuse my language.
Love it. I love it. No.
They're, they show up, they do their thing, and they're going to get the worst end of it every time. This is my ranch, my house, and I didn't invite them, and they don't have the right to come here and hurt my animals or hurt my wife or hurt me. And, it's that simple. If they had, tried to be cordial about it and had actually said, hey, we want to, have a discussion with you and meet you, I would have had no problem with it. But they just started showing up and hurting people and hurting animals, and that's completely off limits. That
is. And by the way, I heard in an interview you were talking about Morgan City, Louisiana. I've actually been there. Actually had a client, you'll like this, Bruce, for a technical writing job. Oceaneering is there in Morgan City. And anyway, I digress on that. So the first thing that really got me was, to me, I find them to be heartless. They took your dog.
They did worse than that. I mean, they've killed at least 3 Rottweilers here, and they killed my pit bull Daisy. And they treat humans, as if we're just bugs. I mean, they have absolutely zero respect for any kind of life. There's no empathy. There's no compassion. There's no attempt to try to create any kind of bridge between us as far as communication goes. They just showed up like a bunch of gangbangers and decided that they were going to do whatever they wanted to. And so I just treated them exactly like that.
I can't help but not think about the series I did here on King Og, the giants.
I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Bruce. It was a fascinating read, and I tell you, it just reaffirms that we're nothing more than a food source.
Well, that's it. And, as you get into the book, you actually start to understand that, quite frankly, the most of these beings that inhabit the fourth dimension or the visit from the fourth dimension are looking at us exactly like food. We are energetic food, period.
I'm sorry, guys. That just pisses me off. I mean, I just want to tell you.
It's a disturbing realization that you're not at the top of the food chain.
Isn't it, though?
It is. It took me a while to digest this too, Wayne.
And no play on words, I'm sure.
Yes. Well done.
Well, you know, and the thing I'm questioning is, where are we now on that chain? I think it's far lower than what most people realize. John, one of the questions I had for you, that the vignette story that y'all put in there was the date night with your wife, and how, you know, and I was telling my wife, she's reading the book now, and because we live that very same thing, you're waiting for your wife. Every married guy knows that when the wife's going to take an hour, and you ain't going to push her. And you go to the restaurant, and I'll let you pick up the story from there. It wasn't your wife?
Well, and see, we have, unfortunately, we have experienced this repeatedly, both where my wife has thought she was with me and I thought I was with her. And it turned out that we were with what looked exactly like the other person, but it wasn't us. And in this particular case, you know, I got to the restaurant. I was sitting across from this person that I thought was my wife. And I looked in her eyes, and her eyes looked a little strange. And then she got up, she went in the bathroom, and she didn't come back. And I asked the waitress to go in and see if my wife was okay. And she said, "There's nobody in there." And I just was sitting there saying to myself, what the heck? You know, and eventually what I ended up doing was calling her phone, and she answered, and she was furious with me. And I was like, "Why are you mad at me? You went in the bathroom here at the restaurant and you disappeared." And she said, "I'm not at the restaurant. I'm at home. I was waiting for you. You just drove away and left me." And I couldn't believe it. And it, you know, I mean, these things have happened, you know, a few different times.
That would unnerve me. I have to be very candid with you to know that. I think the term is doppelganger, but regardless,
that's exactly it.
That would seriously, and you have a background, a degree in psychiatry. I have to tell you, gentlemen, that would seriously unnerve me. The fact that you could have a conversation.
My degree's actually in social work, but yes,
yeah.
it still unnerved me.
Have you ever experienced anything like that, Bruce?
Doppelganger, no. That was, you know, I'm fairly well read in these sort of margin topics, you know, exopolitics, the occult. Theology is my absolute fascination. And in nowhere in all of my reading have I ever encountered this doppelganger thing. I guess the closest would be, you know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Yeah,
but that's a literary doppelganger, or The Secret Sharer, you know, Joe Conrad's great novella. But this, where a passable physical replica that you could drive beside for 45 minutes from Rainbow Valley to Phoenix. No, I mean, it's, I think of all the things talked about in the story, and there's a lot of creepy things in this story.
Yeah, there are.
That's for me, the doppelganger is I think at the top of the list. It's just so unnerving. How would you even do that? Like, I mean, you asked earlier, you know, is it science? Is it technology? My best answer to that is it's somewhere where the magic and the science meet, like Arthur C. Clarke said. You know, that at a certain level, you cannot distinguish between magic and science.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there's a lot of magic in this exopolitics topic too. We didn't go into it in this book because this was just a straight line experiential story toward the end where we sum up. But I mean, there's a lot of people out there saying that Aleister Crowley started all of this UFO stuff by some 1909 ritual he did in Egypt, summoning Awaz, which is the picture he drew, which he called Lamb, which is a pretty close match to a gray alien. But I don't have any answers. I'm just throwing spaghetti against the wall here. I mean, I don't know.
John, for you, did my wife, I mean, we've been married long enough, and you have to your wife as well. There's a smell that we all have that, that's my wife. You sense that. And what got me was that it apparently was so spot on, except for the, like you said, the maybe the eyes. And she experienced you as when she thought it was you, but it wasn't you.
Well, and it's not included in the book, but this has happened what we call off campus as well. My wife and I went to Hawaii for our honeymoon, and we experienced this in Hawaii over almost a month in Hawaii.
Wow. I mean, that's all I can say is just freaking wow. I mean, talk about
it really unnerved. With me, I'm kind of just hardened to everything. I don't expect the worst, but I'm ready to deal with whatever I have to. After 23 years of this, but my wife is still just blown away by a lot of these things, and it really hurts her. And I feel terrible because, it never should have come to this. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. This was never something. If I had known there was anything like this, I would have moved out of the country before I would have bought this place. But I had no idea. And I thought, this was my dream as a child in Evanston. Growing up, I just wanted to have horses. And I thought, wow, this is a great place. It'd be great for horses. And that's all I ever wanted to do when I moved out here was just to have a ranch, have a few animals, enjoy being out west, in Arizona. And I ended up buying the ranch from hell.
The Wild West is still alive. When you talk about the experiences that you've had on this, the animal mutilations, that's still one that baffled me. But I guess when I read the story, is it Brandy? Is that who it is?
Yes.
Yes. That to me was the story, John, that unfolded. To me, that was on a galactic or a cosmic scale. I mean, for there, I got the real sense that this is interdimensional, that what we're dealing with. Multi-dimensions coming together at a crossroads, I think is how you put it in the book itself. So the thing that got me was that they were two walk-ins, right, that was with her?
Well, she brought two with her, and then once she was here, there were two additional ones that just showed up. I mean, it was literally almost like Star Trek, Scotty beam me up. They just literally appeared in the living room. And, we had several hours with these beings. And so I had an opportunity. I kind of make fun of it, and I say, I have a list of 100 questions in case I ever run into an alien. And I literally had that list, and I sat down and I began asking questions. I guess a lot of people would have been, flabbergasted by the experience, but I thought, you know what, this is happening. I've got the questions right here. I'm going to ask them. And so I got a tremendous amount of information that I think would be very beneficial for the future. And subsequent visits after that, I've had a chance to ask even more questions. And so I feel like, at least the experience was not just something that was an amazing experience, but it was valuable.
John, can I ask you a question for myself? And it's one I've been eager to ask you because when I've read the book, is I look at this thing from a point that, I'm a spirit in this body, and eventually I'm going to leave this body. And, as a human being, we look at things, most human beings, into a spiritual equation. Obviously, with the grays that were giving you guys, branding you, what the hell is that about? I guess my question is, do you sense that these beings have a soul, a spirit? Are they spirit? Or do they transcend a technology where they can actually materialize physical matter?
Well, there seems to be a couple of questions there, but
Yeah.
I would tell you that, and that is that as far as the spirit goes, as far as the soul or anything like that goes, I have never gotten the feeling like they were anything more than just an evil embodiment of just what they are. I mean, they don't seem to have any positive purpose. They're predatory. You know, and I think, you know, again, we get back to the food chain. You know, we're not on the top of the food chain. You know, we're somewhere in between. And these creatures are dangerous. They're deadly. I mean, as far as animals go, they definitely have access to higher technology than we have. You know, and that's about all I can tell you. They don't communicate in any way, shape, or form other than by their behavior. At least as far as I've experienced.
Yeah, because I mean, I asked the question: do they believe in a creator? I mean, is the universal, like in the laws of hermetics, is there cause and effect? I mean, is there consequence to their actions? It seems like they operate with immunity, with no fear of any type of repercussions.
I've always gotten the feeling that they weren't acting necessarily on their own behalf. That they were instruments of maybe some other race or some other function. That's all I can tell you. It's a feeling, okay? It's just one of those kind of things. You know, I can't tell you that I have any rational, logical data to put behind it, but it's just how I think about it after all these years. And I mean, I have had experiences with hundreds of these things.
When you took the head off the first time, one of them, I guess the question I had on that, I felt in the book, and I you know, reading it, that there was this righteous indignation. I mean, if someone messed with my wife, God pity the poor fool.
Well, I must admit that I went through a period, you know, I went through a lot of changes. You know, I started out with being overjoyed that I had this ranch. I thought it was wonderful. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was everything that I had wanted. And then gradually, as I found out how weird it was, I became a bit disheartened by it. Eventually, I got very angry over it, and I actually became full of rage. And when they started hurting animals and they started, you know, going after my wife, I literally declared war. And I mean, I went as hard as I could at these things. I didn't care what the consequences were, and I didn't care what the consequences to me were. All I wanted to do was kill as many of them as I could get my hands on. And I did a pretty good job of it.
It seemed like you would become a marked man on that other side. I mean, seriously, the idea of murder, I mean, is that it seems to be universal. You know, the taking of life.
Well, I can tell you that it's interesting. The very first time I killed one of these things, I had a very strange reaction because I said to myself, yeah, I'm glad I killed it. But then I thought to myself, I wonder if there's any laws against this. And,
see,
you know, I thought to myself,
that's my point.
God, I hope I'm not going to get prosecuted for killing an ET. You know, and then I thought to myself, well, yeah, we're living in kind of liberal times and everything, but you know what? If they actually prosecuted me, then they'd have to say that they exist. So then that would be validation. So maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. You know, because at the time I was, you know, there was nobody I could talk to. I mean, I didn't know who to reach out to. You know, it's not like I could call the sheriff and say, hey, guys, I just killed an ET. Could you come and get it? You know, I
was
mean,
Joe the sheriff at time at John while all this was going on?
You betcha.
Oh shit! Oh, excuse me.
and I know Joe personally. Okay, and he has been out to the ranch, so you know, for other matters, not for ETs. But he and I, when we see each other, we kind of look each other, and he knows what I'm all about out here, and you know, I know who he is. So you know, it's kind of an interesting exchange.
Well, the neighbors have actually seen the ships, right?
Well, this is the strange thing again, and that is that when we first moved out here, nobody else was out here for years and years and years, and it was great. And then as the story got out, all of a sudden there became a lot of interest, and now we're surrounded by neighbors. And again, the interesting thing is this, and that is that the neighbors themselves don't come over and tell us what happens. Their kids do. And it's not like we invite them. They're all teenagers, and they're very curious. And occasionally 2 or 3 of them will jump the fence, and they'll come over and knock on the door, and they'll want to talk about it. And I ask them if their parents know they're here, and they say no. And I say, well, you need to go home and tell your parents, I don't want you over here unless your parents give you permission. But I'll kind of walk them back over to the fence and let them ask their questions as they go, or out the front gate. And they have told me lots of stories that they have problems and they see things and nobody wants to admit it. And everybody's going through the same sense of denial. And then I also hear, on the other hand, that they all blame me. That, somehow or another, it's my fault that all this stuff is happening out here. And, I try to tell everybody, look, I'm the nicest guy in the world. If you have questions, go ahead and ask. You won't like the answers probably, but I'll tell you anyway. But nobody ever does. I have one person here that lives nearby, and she will occasionally come to the fence and talk to me and tell me stories. So I definitely know people are experiencing things, but they're just not talking about it. They're either ashamed or they're afraid they'll be called crazy or whatever. But I learned a long time ago, the only way to deal with a bad situation is to face it. And you have to face your fears and you have to talk about it. Otherwise you just, you internalize it and it eats you up inside.
It does. Dealing on this subject of portals, I found it fascinating on the aspect that you actually have them opening up inside your house.
We have one in the living room. And I should preface this once again. There are portals all over Rainbow Valley. They're not just here on the property. We just happen to have a lot more of them, I guess, than most people. I don't know that anybody else really deals with them because nobody's ever come and talked to me about it. But the reason that I know that there are other portals elsewhere is because we've had visitors that have come and they have said that they have seen portals in other places around Rainbow Valley. But yes, we have one on the back property that is a huge one. And then we have one in the living room that, depending on who's around and, sort of who they are, it may or may not activate.
And one of the stories, I'm showing some of the pictures from your Facebook page, the ranch, and some of the most amazing pictures. And the one that gets me the most is the gray itself. What's the background and how this picture was captured on your property?
Is that the one that looks like it's out in the front yard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that one, that was taken by a person that was visiting with a team of researchers out of California, out of Northern California. And they just were standing there focusing the camera, and all of a sudden one walked up and stuck its face right in the front of the camera, like it didn't even know what a camera was. And the person was so shocked that they hit the release on the camera, and they took 2 or 3 pictures. The other 2 were real blurry. You could still see what they were, but one of them was fairly clear.
I mean, this describes, I think, from Bruce on your research as well, this is the classic, I don't know what you would call this. To me, I almost could see this as an incubus.
Yes, an incubus, a succubus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's something, look, I don't, maybe I'm being very human about this, but and I'm not being shallow, but I think that there's a certain degree of spiritual merit I attribute to aesthetic, meaning that beauty is part of God's grace, and these are incredibly ugly creatures.
Yeah.
Right, everything about them is screaming, negativity. So that's how I feel about them. Wayne, may I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Did you get any of that disquiet sense around you reading the book?
The only disquietedness I got was near the end, and particularly where you two gentlemen bring out the fact that um, you talk about the human growth, how Earth is a hothouse, and when you look at those things, to me that disquiets my spirit because it leads to a couple finite conclusions. Either we're an experiment or we're a continuation of something we have no idea. In fact, John, I think you wrote in, I'll quote you, you said that we are a part of an ecosystem we have no idea about. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, the realize something, and that is, we've gone through several different versions of humanity over many thousands of years. I mean, we have sort of ebbed and flowed and gotten to different points in our evolution, in our advancement, where something's happened and the whole civilization has collapsed and been taken. When that happens, we lose our history, our technology, our culture, the whole works, and we start over from ground zero. And I believe that, and again, this is all information that came through interactions with ETs and just channeled information, the whole works. And that is that, we keep starting over again. It's kind of like, the crop dies and it's washed away, or it's whatever, for whatever reason, it disappears and starts over. And it's not just on this planet. I think this planet is being used basically as a place where they plant a species, they tinker with it, they do whatever they want to do with it. They find different ways to control it and teach it and try to get it to teach itself and educate itself. And then they move it around to other worlds. And I believe that there's many other worlds, and that humans are just one brand, one flavor, so to speak, that's out there.
Well, I'm convinced that it is direct manipulation. I contend, gentlemen, that number one, that in 8,000 years of recorded history, our IQ has not increased. Our capacity of using the capability of our brains has not increased. Our lifespans in proportion has really not increased at all, which tells me it's almost like we're in a lab environment. There's something that is suppressing us. And I wonder if it's these malevolent beings. But y'all had, and John, if I'm right on this, once Brandy had her cleansing thing, you've been in touch with what I would call a higher intelligence. I mean, of more of a, I wouldn't call them good, but I would call them basically, they have an upper hand over the Greys. Am I depicting that right?
Sort of. Really what it comes down to, and that is that the range seems to be very attractive to different species of ETs. And we've had cause to meet 3 or 4 different brands or types. And in that process, the conversations that I've had at different times have given me an opportunity, like I said originally, to ask a lot of questions. They're not, it's not like there's good and bad ones. There's some that are indifferent. There are some that are interested in us sort of from an indifferent point of view. They don't want to take any kind of responsibility for us, but they're willing to provide answers to questions. And it's our responsibility, and they keep reiterating this. We have all the answers. We have everything we need on this planet to be able to create any version of our reality that we want to. But we have to take responsibility for it. We have to grow up. We have to decide that it's our world and that we're entirely responsible for everything that happens here. And if we do that, then eventually they may make themselves available to be able to help us, not to do it for us. but to act as an information source, so that we can fix our own problems. And what I've been trying to encourage people for a long time, and that is that, blame doesn't work. Looking at all of our differences rather than our similarities, that's not a solution. We have allowed ourselves to be divided into races, into religious groups, sexual preferences, you name it. There's 100 different ways to slice the pie. What we need to do is look at ourselves as one species and work with each other in problem solving, create answers, create at least the interest in creating answers. We don't need to be looking at our governments for every little solution or anybody other than ourselves and each other, because that's the only way we're ever going to fix what's going on in this world, is to do it ourselves.
And I guess that leads me to the next question. Do they believe in God or a God?
Depends on who you speak to. There are different groups that believe in different things. I wouldn't say I have made a big point out of trying to figure that out with them. I was more interested in very specific questions about things with technology, and trying to get things that I thought were practical, which I have done.
Yeah.
I sense that they believe in a greater force in the universe. Call it God, call it whatever you want to call it.
Source.
They seem to, they acknowledge that. They don't look at it the way we do. Unfortunately, I believe that most of the use of religion in our world has mostly been social control. It has not been for the purpose of trying to deliver us necessarily to a better place or help us to unify. Again, it has been a tool of division. I mean, look at us today. We've got, religions that, don't want anything to do with anybody other than people that are from their religion. Yeah, exactly. There's it's a source not of nurturance, but of violence. So I don't necessarily think that religion is the answer. I think spirituality and the desire to connect to the divine actually holds a lot more promise. But that's just my own personal opinion.
You in the book, y'all bring out the fact that that death to them is nothing that they fear. It's a natural process, and it seems like there is. In my takeaway from it was that life never ends. It continues.
Well, energy is energy. It just transcends from one place to another. But that's a macro point of view. From a individual point of view, these ETs live a very long time, depending on which ones we're talking about. But I mean, 600 or 800 years is nothing for them. So, they have the chance to not only learn from their experiences, but, they're quite wise in terms of seeing our entire history from the beginning to the end to what it is now.
Yeah, they've been watching us.
They have been watching us and studying us for thousands of years.
See? Yeah. And again, I go back to King Og. The expression he talked about, the dark ones, and these energetic beings. And when I read y'all's book, it I'm telling you that I saw a lot of correlation with these, whatever the hell they are. I mean, I don't know what species they are, but they seem to have the same attributes of someone who really doesn't have any empathy.
Yeah.
Well, again, we have a tendency to want to project our values and our language and way of perceiving what we look at in other individuals onto them. And that's a huge mistake, because we're one race and we have a completely different culture than they do. They don't see us the way we see them, so And also realize from a karmic point of view, these guys don't want to be responsible for us. Okay.
Yeah, you brought that out a bit, a whole lot about the karma. They really believe in that. Is that correct?
Well, they don't call it karma. I mean, that's our way of trying to make it something that humans can understand. But the thing about it is that they're not responsible for us. They're not responsible for this planet. We are. And they want us to grow up and get with the program and identify that this is our job. It's our world. You know, I mean, we have a tendency to, bitch a lot and complain a lot and say, rescue us and do all these things. It's not going to happen. There's a big thing in the exopolitics world that, one day all the ETs are going to, help us and that they're going to disclose themselves and they're going to do all these things. I don't know where that comes from because I guarantee you in my interactions with them, they would deny that. They would jump up and down and deny that flatly. Is
there a council, John, I keep on thinking, is there a hierarchy that man is not aware of that is out there governing the cosmos?
Well, people talk about like the Galactic Federation and things like that. These different races, some of them that are, pretty much very technically advanced, they know about each other. They interact. But I truly believe that for the most part, we have sort of had some kind of blockage put on us. It's as if we're quarantined because we have some tremendous abilities, but unfortunately we're so undisciplined and misaligned with each other that they really don't want us out there, just getting involved in other cultures and doing things because we don't handle ourselves well.
There goes the neighborhood.
Yep. Take the trailer park into space.
Exactly. It's like, damn it, there they go. Can I ask y'all, you had in the almost in the very end, a section that I found interesting, and you titled it Reptilians, Black Magic, and Satanism. That is, and as I read it, it was very interesting because we've talked about these grays that it's like, again, I'm learning, I can't perceive it through human perception because I don't know what they are. But how did y'all come into that?
Well, part of it is the fact that if you go through all the way back in all these different cultures, you see very ritualistic behavior. And that ritualistic behavior is unfortunately very malevolent. And you see it everything from, the ancient Egyptian culture all the way forward into what ends up being the Germans with the Nazis. And searching out, trying to obtain power is basically what it always comes down to. The ability to be able to control. And it's, unfortunately, a pretty malevolent thing.
I can't help but not wonder, I did a show today and I looked back at the 16th century paintings, the frescoes that were there, and it clearly shows, in fact, I'm pulling one up now, what I would call an ET presence that tells me that they have almost, and this is just my opinion, manipulated the whole process. And I got it here. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. And I don't know, John, if you can see this, but look at the replay and you'll see what I'm talking about. So this painting right here, this is from the 15th century. This is Moses. And that's clearly a saucer up there. That's a spaceship. Yeah. Which tells me, John, backing up to what you were saying, they have been here, I think, from way before we were here.
Well, I would agree with that. And I think we see this, in so many different aspects. I mean, basically, I believe that we were, if you go all the way back with the Anunnaki, that was the first race that was here. And then that what came after that was a group called the Ajiji, and the Ajiji are actually the Greys.
The Greys.
And so they have been the Greys, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they we have been dealing with this pretty much almost since day one.
I keep on thinking, so if I was a man, let's say 3rd BC, and I saw a Grey, to me that would be a devil. Is there correlation, I think, between their impact on humanity of past cultures? I mean, I can't think that modern man is the first time they started experimenting on us. I think they've been doing that for a very long time. Abductions, of which, John, you and your wife are very familiar with. They branded you.
Yeah, well, that's very true, unfortunately. And we've had marks all over us from various different things. My wife is actually, she was diagnosed with a disease called scleroderma, which she got directly from being abducted right up into a ship. I was able to prevent them from taking her by brandishing a semi-automatic rifle and firing a number of different rounds into the light source right at the bottom of the ship that they were trying to pull her up into, and she fell back and fell literally on top of me. I broke her fall, and shortly after that, she became very ill. Her skin literally began to shed off her body. She was horribly sick from it. We went to 2 different hospitals. Nothing happened. They just looked at us as if they didn't even want to treat us. And then shortly after, a couple of days later, the Center for Disease Control showed up, and we began to have various different federal agencies that contacted us and started interviewing us. So, and we understand from other people that there are quite a few troops, military people, that come down with scleroderma after contact situations. So, yeah, it's real bad. It's not an easy journey for us.
No, and I was taken by the story you asked me earlier, Bruce. Was there an energy? Was there an impact? There is. I mean, you read the story, you can't help but not have these highs and lows and these feelings of intrusion. The story you were talking about when you were in your living room and they burnt the back of your calf, you could actually see the smoke coming up. I mean, yes. I thought immediately of almost ritualistic.
Well, the strange thing about it is it's no particular shape or design. I mean, nothing I'm aware of anyway. And literally, I was just sitting on the floor watching TV, and my wife was sitting right next to me. And all of a sudden, I had shorts on. It was, warm weather. And the next thing I knew, I was literally watching my own leg burn right in front of me.
You see, certain cultures would see that as almost demonic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly Catholicism.
Yes.
You would be considered cursed. And it's interesting. So I want to get back to Dr. Brandy and what she was doing. She actually did a cleansing of the house, right? Because this house has got some tragedy to it.
Well, nobody who's ever lived in this house has lived here as long as we have. There was the original owners that bought the house. The guy who built the house originally built it as a surprise for his wife. And when he brought her out to look at the house, she reacted almost the same way my wife did when she first saw it, which was, hell no, I am not moving in there. I don't want anything to do with this. I will divorce you if you make me. Well, she ended up divorcing him, and they never did anything with the place. They just sold it for practically nothing. And it went through a bunch of different owners. And some of the owners that have lived here have been some pretty spectacularly strange people. So, but to get to your question about Brandy tried to excise the spirit of a young man who literally the day before his high school graduation put a shotgun in his mouth in the living room and blew his head off. So yeah, there's been a lot of tragedy here as well.
This is the disquiet of the Greys. I had it here on the mountain. It happened the first time I tried to write the book with John. It's very subtle, Wayne. It sneaks into your thinking. It's very difficult to distinguish whether you're just in a bad mood or something is screwing with you. Because of the isolation of this environment up on the mountain in the Earthbag house, I was really able to pinpoint it this time. And I was going to quit. But we were about a week, maybe 10 days into the book after I promised John, after 7.5 years, I would get it done this time. And I was about to make the phone call and say, look, I can't do it. It just brings too much grief into my life. I'm fighting with my wife all the time, a lot of weird stuff, a lot of really negative synchronicity. And then all of a sudden, about 10 days into this write of the book, Rosemary, my wife, and I woke up on a Saturday morning, and there was a ball of white light at our ceiling. And it cleaned out the house, and I was able to finish the book. You know, yeah, I'll after the interview, I will send you the picture that Rosemary took. She called it angelic. You know, she's and I don't know. I didn't want to tell her. I think it's extraterrestrial, not angelic. But I was able to create a space to finish the book. And this is what happened the first time I tried to write it. And if you ask John, a lot of people have started this book and quit halfway through. So it's not just the location of the ranch. Once you tune into this stuff, it's what I'm starting to wonder now after this book is what is the total control over our human infrastructure by these extraterrestrial presences?
Yeah.
What is it? Do they control finance, government, the Vatican, the Caliphate, the Sanhedrin? Where does it end? You know?
It doesn't.
And you know, I'm right there with you. I mean, I have a personal vendetta against the Elohim. I think that they have done more damage to the psyche collectively of humanity than any other species. And the fact that they came out and announced themselves, that's what got me. They didn't hide it. We just incorporated it as into a god.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, so, you know, it validates, John, what you said earlier. And gentlemen, I want to compliment you on, because the way you brought the book in, you dedicated a whole thing to conquering fear. And I really love the narrative that you brought out. And John, as you were saying to yourself, that you're telling people fear is indeed the mind killer.
It is. It truly is. And it, see, the thing about it is it does more than just paralyze you and make you want to resort to sort of programming instinct. What it does is it kills the imagination.
Yeah.
And the one thing that humans have more than anything else that brings them to the point where they can be close to God is their imagination. We have the ability to solve anything if we use our imagination. And you know, the first part of dealing with that is getting rid of fear. Fear is irrational. It is the great killer.
Do you find that maybe our ability as a species for imagination is something that's lacking in some of these other species?
I would say that it's a different expression. Ours is organic. Theirs is complex. They have so much information that they have sorted out and organized and referenced, that they have the ability that anything that would occur to them, you know, they have almost to us an infinite amount of knowledge to be able to draw down from. We have just our organic being, the ability to sit quietly and to dream.
Yeah.
And in dreaming, we have the ability to be able to create anything.
I love that. I know we're getting over the hour, but I have to ask, and it was the great thing that Joyce wrote in the book. I want to know about these Roman soldiers. I mean, John, I wrote to you an email, and Bruce, I know we were talking about earlier. That one blows my freaking mind. I mean, I got to tell you, because the implications on the space-time continuum is all freaked out. I mean, it's complete blown up. So,
well,
John, I'll let you tell the story. It blows my mind.
Do we have time before the
break? Oh,
break?
sure we do. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Joyce and I were sitting around watching TV, watching a movie, and it was summertime. And in the summertime here, we have what they call the monsoon season, where we get these tremendous storms that show up early evening, and sometimes they'll last a few hours, and they're quite powerful. I mean, they knock out power. They just do a lot of damage. And we'd only been in the ranch for a couple of years at that point, and one night, all of a sudden the power went out. We were watching TV, and from absolutely no good reason at all, this very powerful white light came on behind us in the corner of the house. And it was literally almost like an old black and white movie. And we could see what looked like two figures walking through from one end of the house to the other. And they were dressed like Roman soldiers. I mean, they had on the whole, uniform. One of them had a great big spear. The other one had a broadsword or a Roman sword at his side. And you could see literally the trees. You could see the terrain. You could see everything. It was like somebody was all of a sudden showing this movie in our living room, but it wasn't a movie. It was like a glimpse of some kind of time distortion where we were able to just sit there and watch it. And literally these soldiers walked right through the house and walked right out the corner of the room that we were in, right in front of us, never saw us. They had no idea that we were there.
And the other two properties, what is it? Was it the Ridgeway Ranch? What is the one that
Bradshaw and Skinwalker?
Yes. Right. So the Bradshaw Ranch is apparently the really interesting one. Dinosaurs, is that right?
Well, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Bruce.
The
situation with it is they're all parallel. All three of these ranches are parallel going north. We're the lowest one, then there's Bradshaw, and then there's Skinwalker, but we all share sort of the same alignment.
I love this. So the as I understand, as I read in the book, they actually saw what would be considered to be raptors. I mean, and with the footprints, the whole bit, right?
Yeah, that blew me away too. Because you could say to yourself, well, okay, the portals are creating an optical illusion. Maybe I'm psychically seeing it while my eyes are open. It's a kind of cognitive hallucination. The raptor goes back through the portal closes, you go out with a camera, and there's footprints of raptor prints there. So it sort of throws a monkey wrench into the whole magic theory of extraterrestrials. They seem to be real, or they can appear. They're physical. They can harm you. They can leave footprints.
That's
we have DNA. We have DNA. I have literally a rock that one of these things was holding in its hand, and somebody shined a bright laser in its face and it dropped it on the back of the property. I mean, we have artifacts,
I've shown that. We have what was that device? And every time I always think of the Anunnaki, we see the pictures of them holding that. Was that like a location beacon or something, did you think? I mean, what was your thoughts on that?
Well, it had a piece of, I don't know what to call it, a crystal about 3 inches long that in one hand, and it had this black rock in the other, and it dropped both of them and disappeared. It just blinked out, and I walked over and grabbed both of them. Now, we don't really understand what they're for, but at the time that it dropped them, it opened a portal right in front of, in back of us, right in front of it, because we were between the portal and the ET, the gray, and there were 3 of us there.
Wow. And there's the device. I mean, if you looked at that, it looks basically like, you would see something on the ground like a stone. How big is this, John, that we're looking at? Is it
it would fit in just about the palm of your hand.
Okay. Wow.
The interesting thing also about it is that it's, you can look right through it. It has this almost like sun-like, engraving through it, because you can literally stick your finger right through the thing, but it's larger on one side than it is on the other. It tapers.
It's just amazing. I mean, when I see that kind of that type of evidence, it tells me I still get over these portals. To me, it's an idea that I think you're right. I think they're all around. You just happen to be
the interesting thing about I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
The interesting thing about the portals that we have here, according to what we've been told, and that is that some portals just go from point A to point B, even if that's somewhere else in the universe. But only very few have the ability to go back and forward in time. And that's why we see the kind of things that we see. We had 2 children that literally came through the portal on the back of the property. 2 little kids that looked like they came out of the 1600s, 1700s, the way they were dressed. And they just literally walked right from the portal across the back of the pasture, around the horse pens. I spoke to them. They looked at me, they smiled, and they just walked right through the property and walked across the street to the mountains and disappeared across the street. This
Bruce, coming for me is from a theological point, it really expands what death is.
Yes, absolutely.
Doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. It's just, for me, death is a translation of some sort. You let go of the biological suit, but the essence of what you are continues. Maybe some of the focused discernment that comes with incarnation goes away, and the afterlife is more about your tendencies. I'm just speculating. To change it up just a little bit, one of the things that fascinate, and I guess this is going back to my journalism degree, but one of the things that fascinated me the most was the hatchet job they did on John Mack at Harvard. What is it about us talking about this and getting a conversation going as a human race that is so repugnant to the academic and governmental powers that be? The evidence is overwhelming. Both Carla Turner and John Mack said, look, I don't know if aliens are abducting people. What I'm telling you is there's a uniform experience of consciousness and cognition that has physical attributes and unique identifiers that are consistent across multiple countries on this planet. And, there's that quote from the dean, I think it's the dean of the medical school at Harvard, anybody in our faculty who would entertain these ideas is, and it was amazing to me that they had Susan Clancy just ready to go there as soon as John Mack died with her counter thesis from the Harvard Medical School. And what does she follow up with? A book suggesting that pedophilia doesn't harm children. It's almost right in your face now, Wayne. And it's so in our faces now. I have to wonder, are we figuring this out, or are they just, is it time for them to just disclose to us that they run everything here?
I'm going to take on the latter. I think it sounds like it's obviously they control the narrative. I mean, isn't it the first rule of disinformation in Black Ops is that you put out the truth out there and then you go and disprove it. But she's actually proving it. That's when I read your book on that point. I did a little research on that. I mean, it was a setup.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. You know, the whole thing about this is that it's their way of being able to test the level of saturation, is to be able to just come right out and say it with a straight face and see how people react. And unfortunately, we've gotten to the point where people are so dumbed down and they're so just turned off by you know, they're desensitized to so much violence and horror that they just shrug their heads and go, yeah, okay, whatever you say.
well, I happen to agree. I think you made the point in the book, and if I believe I'm quoting this right, is that as I see the leaders today of the world, many of them I'm convinced are not human. It's
Yeah.
they're masters at division, masters at it.
Well, you know, when you get into the idea of not being human, the question becomes, what do we mean? I agree with you, by the way, but the question becomes, what do we mean by that? You know, biologically, in terms of the physical suit, they're human, but it's what's inside the suit. You know, again, and this is the Cynthia Crawford thing, you know. What does she mean? Her mission was to come to Earth. She was born through a womb, you know, and, you know, so there's this whole new kind of almost theological cosmology that opens up when you entertain this whole extraterrestrial narrative. And then when you just look at it from the perspective of etymology, we've been talking about this for millennia. You know, as we say in the book, you know, technically speaking, by the rules of language, you know, the Archangel Gabriel and the Archangel Michael are extraterrestrials.
They have to be.
Of course. Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and to add to your point, I have a friend who is a cop, and he actually told me, he said, and he noticed the change a couple of years ago, but he says, Wayne, he said, there are people that they pull over. He said, they've got no soul. He said, their eyes are as blank as, you know, a piece of film. It begs.
I would agree with that.
Thank you, John. I don't know. I can't help it after reading your book. I mean, and like I said, I meditate and I think about it, and I'm running this through, that if we're an experiment, well, it would certainly be logical that you would run co-experiments with it, which meaning saying that they're not all us. And I'm not even sure who we are.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Wayne, something that I ran into a few years ago. I knew a gentleman that had been very involved in government programs, and he ran a group here where he would invite people from all different disciplines, basically representing science, religion, technology, all different things, but all very high-end individuals, to the point where even some ETs attended some of these groups. And so we had a chance to really meet some very, in some cases, very strange but very interesting individuals. At one of these meetings, I met a couple of these, I would say, late teens that were what they call the black-eyed children.
Yes.
And I tell you what, I thought, well, what the heck, I'll be friendly and see if I can strike up a conversation. Some of the most absolutely just make your skin crawl. I mean, you couldn't speak to them in any way that didn't end in an argument. They were the most narcissistic, these two individuals that I met. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and had access to technology that they even brought with them that was incredible. But I tell you what, they absolutely freaked me out, because they were in no way, shape, or form like any kind of human I had ever met in my life. So we definitely have a lot of different individuals running around that don't meet any kind of familiar categorization or anything else. I mean, the world is full of very different types of species out there.
Your story of meeting the Men in Black is, I think, a perfect example of that. I mean, when they walk through your gate, and I keep on thinking, so are we seeing a hologram here? Are we seeing, are these spiritual creatures as opposed to physical creatures? I mean, you met them. I mean, what was your impression? What kind of a vibe did you get off of them?
They didn't seem human to me. I don't know what they were, but they really didn't seem human. I mean, they literally walked through the front gates. They drove up first. They drove up in dark blue SUVs with government plates, parked right outside the front of the ranch. Didn't open the gates. They literally walked right through them like the gates were made out of smoke. They almost look like the Blues Brothers, believe it or not. I mean, they had the dark suits and the hats and the sunglasses, the whole works. I mean, it was just, and I wasn't even aware that there were such a thing at that time called Men in Black. I just thought it was, just a couple of people, probably government agents of some kind, coming up to give me a hard time. And I walked up to them on the front driveway, and probably about 50, 60 feet in from the front gate. And I said, "Can I help you with something?" And they just looked at me, and one of them got very close to my face, maybe a foot away, and at the time said to me, "You must stop posting on the cause website." This was Peter Gersten, the UFO lawyer, ran a website back in the day, and told me, and they kept repeating the exact same thing: "Stop posting on this website." And turned around and walked away. And I mean, there was no, anything. They knew exactly who I was. They called me by name. This one called me by name. And the very strange thing about it, it was all strange, but one thing that was very strange about it was when I looked at the face, the skin looked like raw chicken. I mean, it was, Arizona, everybody's got a tan because you're out in the sun, and you can't help it. I mean, even if you're just casually walking around, you get some kind of tan. These guys had absolutely no tan. They looked like they just crawled out of the morgue. I mean, they looked dead. The skin was kind of oily, almost wet looking, and it was just as white and pale as you could, imagine. It's crazy.
And to think they work for our government, that means we're paying their own paycheck. Bastards.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were driving a car, truck.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, who wouldn't like to have an SUV, blues, and,
yeah.
Wow, this has really gone fabulous, guys. John, I know you're very passionate in one of your causes that actually drove you to your ranch, and that is you take care of abandoned horses. Is that right?
It's not just abandoned horses. We started an organization called Hopeful Hooves, which we go ahead and rescue horses that have been abandoned or left out in the desert to die. Unfortunately, people buy horses on impulse, and they think they're the greatest thing in the world until they realize how expensive they are. And then they literally drive them out to the desert and dump them. And, these horses are used to being fed, and they're domestic horses. They're not wild horses. So they have no way to survive out there, and they literally starve to death. Unfortunately, people use them for target practice. Dogs attack them. Horrible, horrible things happen to them. And so what I do is I go out into the desert, and I feed these horses, and eventually they just end up following me back home to the ranch, and I take care of them, and I give them sanctuary.
Well,
we started a 501c3 charity over it. So we do accept donations. They're tax deductible. Anybody who's interested in doing that can go to our website, which is www.hopefulhooves.org, and all the information is there. You can make a donation on PayPal, or you can just go ahead and send money to the ranch, 14700 South Tut Hill Road, TUTHILL Road, Buckeye, Arizona, 85326. And
I'll put your address on there.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of help, man. Horses are expensive.
They are, and they're lovely creatures, and all that information except for the address, and I'll put that after the show, folks. It's already there, linked. I love horses. I grew up with them, and I happen to think that they're smarter than most people I know, but don't tell anyone.
Well, they've seen a lot, they've been through a lot. Long before we got them, they'd been through a lot, and back in like 2008, we had as many as 100 horses dumped on us because people were going broke and losing their homes, and they were just midnight movers, and they'd leave the horses behind. We had people tying up horses to our front gates. We had a camel tied up at one point to our front gates.
A camel?
Yeah. We've had, people throw cats, dogs, you name it, snakes, iguanas, you name it. We've had it, put in a bag or a pillowcase.
What the hell's wrong with people? Well, Bruce,
they are impulsive.
Yeah. Bruce, have you spent time at the ranch personally yourself?
No, and I have no desire to go there.
None, huh?
It came to me when I wrote the book. I've seen enough of it. I've felt enough of it. Writing the book is a real trip. It gets into your dreams. It was a whole thing I went through, and John helped me a lot with that. And this isn't an area I would seek to do a lot of writing in. But no, I no offense, John. I don't want to visit Stardust Ranch.
It's okay.
Well, y'all
I'd rather come to Costa Rica anyway.
Yeah, you come here. You come here. I have horses.
It's interesting because when I think about the ranch itself, y'all wrote that you don't actually need a physical portal on your property. They can also contact you through the portal of your mind. Y'all want to expand a little bit on that for a second?
Well, John, can I talk about...
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I'll talk about writing the book. Now, I don't want to sound, paranoid or crazy or stupid, but I think we're way past that point.
Oh, yeah.
But I can tell you from trying this, what was it the first time, John, 2012, 2013, we tried this?
Yeah. God, we spent hours and hours and hours talking.
Okay.
And
yeah, John and I have literally in the last 7 years, 7 years ago, and then picking up again this time. We've literally spent hundreds of hours on Skype, and a lot of it was recorded, and that was the basis of the book. I can tell you, Wayne, that every time I've written this book, sometime in when I start to write daily, when I commit, after about 72 hours, I get what I call an initiatic dream. And the first one, I was in a jail like Rikers Island in New York. This is the 2012 dream. And I was in I hadn't been assigned to a cell yet. I was in some kind of processing center alone, sitting on a wooden bench. And the mesh gate opened up and 4 Rottweilers came in and circled me. Well, John's nickname is Roddy John because on top of horses, at any given time, he can have 15 or 20 male and female pairs of Rottweilers. This time in 2019, when I did the book, the initiatic dream was like a Western town. And these guys with the handlebar mustaches and the big rain slickers, they came into my dream, and it was like the Glanton gang out of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. And they circled me and they said, it's going to be okay. We're going to, and it's like this protection comes into my life to prepare me to write the book. And then I always don't quite know what to make of it. And then I get into the book and I said, oh yeah, that's why I need protection. Whatever these forces are, here is my 2 cents worth. I think we need the whole of humanity to gain awareness of what's going on. And in that collective awareness, I think our collective consciousness can repel this. And the reason I say that is they don't want this knowledge proliferating. Not the Greys, not the associate negative extraterrestrials, or the human familiars that work with them. And I think it's all coming out now. And you can see everybody trying to spin a narrative, whether it's the US government or the Vatican or whomever. They're trying to get on top of this and control the narrative. But whatever this veil is between this 3D reality we live in and the fourth dimension or the astral plane, I'm no astrologer, but it seems to be getting thinner and thinner by the month now. And more people are seeing the orbs and having these experiences. So this is either a breakthrough point for the human race where we gain a new level of consciousness and certitude as sentient beings and spiritual beings, or it's the declaration that we're completely colonized and have been colonized for thousands of years. And, you know, get used to it. It's always been Egypt. Nothing's ever changed.
And I hate that latter part.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
But you know what? I got to introduce some hope here. You know,
Thank you. Thank you.
The situation with the homelessness, you know, all the various things that look so awful. I look at those things as opportunities, because I look inside myself and I know that no matter how much anger, hatred, disappointment, sadness that I have felt living on this ranch, dealing with all these horrible things that I've had to deal with, I know that in a moment I could reach into my heart and I could express love and I could express kindness and you know, and I could change and do whatever's necessary in order to make a difference. And I know that every other person that walks this planet, that exists in them somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have the opportunity to solve some of the most pressing issues right now. But all we got to do is make up our minds that we want to do it.
I agree with you on that, John. And I often sometimes think that we have, like you said, not only the ability to the desire, but it seems like there's something working against us that almost tries to oppress us from pushing that forward.
Well, and it's been a campaign forever. I mean, all you got to do is look at Hollywood, you know. I mean, look at all the, you know, and look around us. Every popular media source, it's always the same thing. And that is that, you know, we know something that you don't. If you want to be one of us and you want to be cool and you want to be, you know, all the things that we think that everybody, you know, is out there striving to try to be, all you got to do is just come in with us and be one of us, you know? And that's the last thing in the world anybody needs to do. I mean, we need to take stock in ourselves. We need to look at what our core values are and to understand that you don't have to go into a church in order to have God in your life. All you have to do is just reach out and say, Lord, be in my life. I need you. Help me. It's
I like
done.
what, yeah, you know, and the thing I got as I was concluding your book was basically taking responsibility for our own actions and our own thoughts. Maybe that's oversimplifying it.
No.
But,
No, it is. I mean, it's really just about saying, you know what, I own my life.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one that I have to be responsible for it, you know? And so that means standing up and saying, look, this is who I am. This is what I want to be. And this is what I'm willing to do. Quit making excuses, you know, reach out. That's all you got to do. There's always going to be somebody there who's going to reach back. It might not be the person you imagine it's going to be, but somebody's out there and they're going to reach back.
That's a message of hope.
Yes, agreed.
Wow.
But,
go ahead, John. I mean, Bruce.
Yeah, you know, I hate to be the baseline of cynicism, and I agree with the spiritual hope that John is putting forward. I totally believe in that. But I would remind you, Wayne, of the last chapter of the book. It seems as though when you look at it from about 1890 onwards, we've been building this Albert Pike prison. It's really coming into focus now that none of this has been by accident. You know, none of it. You know, all these 50-50 decisions. Do we go with Edison? Do we go with Tesla? And every one we get wrong. That's like sitting down at a blackjack table and playing correctly, hitting your 16s when the dealer has face, and losing 40 hands in a row. By the laws of probability, it's not possible. So they've been the human familiars, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that there are groups of human familiars working with the negative ETs. I'll throw out a couple of ancillary books for people to read, although I don't like to countersell when we're here promoting a book. But a good one is Invisible Masters by Leo Zagami. He'll give you a kind of a Masonic and Rosicrucian history of the extraterrestrials and human association with them. Another one is The Gods of Eden by William Bramley. Is a
great book, by the way. Great book.
An excellent read. But here's my hope. Maybe the negative and the positive work together. And when we get spiritually lethargic and too comfortable, which certainly we have from the baby boomers onward after World War II, maybe we need the good scare to get spiritually aligned again. Maybe they're just fulfilling some kind of a role. That's about, I suppose you could call that positive.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully the outcome is. I mean, sometimes you have to, what was it that Churchill said? If you're going through hell, don't stop.
I hadn't heard that, but he's got so many great quotes.
It's like, it just works.
Yeah.
Well, John, as we exit out of here, I'm going to let you kind of take us out, say something to the audience. And by the way, folks, the book is on, I think you can probably buy it everywhere. I got it on Amazon. It's a good read. I recommend it. I finished it in record time. So, yeah.
And I am autographing copies. People are sending me copies daily and asking me to autograph them. So that's available if anybody wants that. Just send the book to the ranch, postpaid, with a return envelope, and I will go ahead and sign the book for you. It's available in hard copy on Lulu, and it's available on electronically for download, as well as soft copy or soft cover on Amazon.
Excellent. I enjoyed it. I'd like to have you guys back on. I mean, I still have a list of questions that go this long, but I'm sure you get that all the time. But this has been a fascinating time. I really do enjoy it. I want to thank you both.
Well, I want to
thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thank you for reading the book and enjoying it and promoting it, Wayne. It is an important. I think John and I both wanted to reach people that don't normally engage the exopolitics topic.
Yeah.
My mother read it. She's 82. She was a Carmelite nun before she got married, and that was a fascinating conversation. And
I can only imagine.
Oh yeah, you can imagine. Yeah. And so for anybody who's ever wondered about, what is this UFO thing? There are so many, level 4 narratives out there now. Like, you got to be in the game for 10 years to understand them. Like these so-called disclosure movements on YouTube and stuff like that. It's my belief, and I'm not speaking for John Edmonds here. This is just my belief, but again, that's a ham-fisted attempt to control this unraveling narrative as the fourth dimension becomes more present in our lives. And there's some truth in it, and what those, I'm not going to name any names, but the exopolitics world has become a big narrative now. And there's a tremendous amount of disinformation in those narratives. Nobody is telling you the whole truth, and nobody really wants to broach the topics that are a little bit more of this ecosystem predation. We're not at the top of the food system topic.
Yeah, I agree. And John, I think you said it about 90% of what we've been taught is wrong about history.
Well, it's just not about history. It's about everything.
About everything, yeah.
That's the problem. It's everything. We have been so misled. Everything that we have been told was designed to make us impotent and to make us helpless. It's to teach us dependence. And that is exactly the wrong message.
That just pisses me off. I gotta tell you, it just does.
Well,
gentlemen,
this is a chance, Wayne, to wake up. This is a chance for everybody. I tell people, because people come to me and they say, I don't know how I can make a difference. I don't know that I know anything important. And I say, the very first thing that you know is that you don't know, but that you care enough to want to know. that means that's something we can work with.
I could have y'all back on. I mean, we could expand out from there. And to think that this is tied into what we would call a supernatural. I don't know, paranormal. I think it's more supernatural because I think it's very natural. It's just that to us, it looks different.
Well, something, Wayne, that we should talk about in the future is what the future of the ranch is going to be, because it's getting ready to have a whole redo.
I'll tell you what, I'd be honored to have you on and talk about that. Seriously. I keep telling my wife, I said, I'd like to go out and just drive by there. And she says, you do realize it's in the desert? And I said, yeah. I said, when is it cool in the desert? Is it ever cool in the desert? Right now. Okay.
Right now. Yeah. I mean, right now we've had a ton of rain. I mean, we have weeds out there that are 3 feet tall.
Well, you got our rain.
Amazing right now. Yeah, it's crazy.
When I heard that they zapped you on the ship and they left your ass out there for, what was it, 3 hours and 125 degrees, or was it longer?
Oh, it was a lot longer.
Who does that?
Literally, I got taken out and left 17 miles from the ranch, naked, in the desert, in 120-degree heat, and had to walk back barefoot and find my way back to the ranch with no water. And it took me hours and hours and hours.
Both of y'all,
Many years ago.
I used to stay at a nudist camp, and I got sunburned one time in a place that most men don't even want to think about. And so, John, that's what I was connecting to when I was reading that story. I said, oh, man, he had to be hurting for certain. I mean, seriously.
I'm telling you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Please stay with me as we get. Thank you all. I know I really went over on this, but it was well worth it. Hey, think about making a donation to Hopeful Hoofs. It's a good place. It's a good cause. And if any of you have ever been around horses, I think they are probably the smartest creatures on this planet. Again, Bruce MacDonald, thank you, sir. John Edmonds, I want y'all back on. And y'all have yourself a good evening, and we'll talk again real soon. Gentlemen, stay with me, please. Thank you.